Hello, welcome to this video. Today we're going to be going over Blizzard's first in the works article that they released, which is a insight into some of their upcoming developments within Hearthstone. But we're only going to be focusing on one aspect today, and that's wild balance. So I'm going to read off the statement and pop it up behind you so we can get a look at a couple of paragraphs. There's a few statements in there and a couple of questions. There's been an ongoing discussion within the team regarding how Wild should play. Right now, Wild feels like standard, but with an elevated power level and a vast library of cards. Should Wild live up to its name more, where we allow crazy and powerful combos to happen, even in the early game? Generally, it's harder for any one strategy to be dominant in Wild, since everything is so powerful and everyone has access to so many tools. But do we want those strategies to exist? We know that there are players who prefer to have a mode that offers that kind of gameplay. There's also a point to consider that the reason to have multiple modes in Hearthstone is for them all to play differently. But we also recognise that there might be decks like Legacy which become too prevalent and simply aren't fun to play against. We'd love to hear your opinions about what you want from Wild, what do you think of how it is now, and what's the role you see for it in the future of Hearthstone. So we're going to dissect a few paragraphs that they've presented to us here and answer a couple of the questions. I'm going to be answering obviously from my perspective and my opinion. Obviously people play Wild for different reasons. They enjoy Wild for different reasons. So this is just from my point of view. And like I say, if you have your own point of view that you want to get across to Blizzard, do so in a kind of productive manner. You can leave a message on Reddit. Obviously, you can leave a message on the Blizzard article itself to get your thoughts and feelings across. But we're just going to dissect this, so let's jump right in. So we're going to look at the first sentence. There's been an ongoing discussion within the team regarding how Wild should play. From the first sentence, you can kind of see that the development team is maybe split as to how they want Wild to progress and how they want to balance it going forward. There's a couple of camps you can be in for this. You can be of the opinion that you should leave Wild as it is and not touch any of the old cards and only balance standard, which will still affect Wild in some way. Or you're of the camp where you believe that some extreme examples or some extremely powerful cards should be modified to make them a bit more palatable for the Wild ladder. A good example of this would be the Nagasiwich situation that arose a couple of months ago, and also Razaran patches. And Blizzard in the past have preemptively nerfed Razaran patches before they were only Wild exclusive. So just looking into past nerfs and changes to cards, you can see that they have put some care into Wild. But then again, they have printed a card like Psych Melon recently, which causes a couple of issues which we'll get into later. So right now, from the first sentence, you can see that they don't know what direction to go in. They don't know if they should leave it, allow these crazy combos to continue, or they don't know if they should intervene in some situations. The next sentence reads, right now Wild feels somewhat like standard, but with an elevated power level and a vast library of cards. I agree to this statement to some extent. If you take a look at the tier 1 list for standard, and you take a look at the tier 1 list for Wild, not many of the decks line up. You can see Quest Rogue is a tier 1 deck in standard, nowhere to be seen in Wild. But if you look at like tier 2 decks in standard, I'd say they more match the tier 1 decks in Wild, which would make that statement true in that case. So I think the spot on there. Wild is a more elevated version of standard. Even Shaman is a good example. Odd Paladin is a good example. Tempo Mage is a good example, and old Combo Druid was a good example. The current iteration of Combo Druid with Psych Melon, I think, has surpassed that statement. This statement, he said it's an elevated power level. I think Psych Melon takes it beyond that, which again we're going to get into a little bit later in the video. Next, we dive in a bit further. Should Wild live up to its name more and allow for crazy and powerful combos to happen even in the early game? Now, this statement, I think, is pointing directly at Druid, and it's pointing directly at Psych Melon. You can see in this the statement that they've made here, or the question, it's actually put forward as a question. They're asking us, the Wild community, do we think that these crazy powerful combos should exist, and should they be allowed to be played out this early? Now, this question, from my perspective, I'm going to say crazy combos should exist, but they shouldn't happen within turns 5 to 8. I think that's too early. I think that's what they're getting at there. A good example of this would be Naga Sea Witch and Giants, right? You could do this on turn 5 and turn 6. You could consider it a combo where you'd play Sea Witch and then possibly like 2 to 5 Giants in one turn. That's far too early. Turn 5, turn 6, far too early. It doesn't allow for interactivity. It doesn't allow players to do these crazy powerful combos. And it becomes a much more rock, paper, scissors and less of a game. I think they've prefaced it with a question: should these powerful combos happen? Yes, they should. In the past, Druid was using Togwaggle and Malagos to do its combinations and crazy combos, but they were using UI, Nourish, all the ramp cards in order to do this. With the printing of Psych Melon, this is where the issue lies. When you print a 4-mana card that Druids can transition into while still ramping, it becomes a problem. The card essentially draws every single piece of the Druid's combo, and with that in combination with ramp, that's when crazy and powerful combos become ridiculous, as previously seen with Naga Sea Witch. It's a similar kind of situation where it warps the meta around. Like, if there's a lot of Druids getting played, people will start playing aggro more. Mid-range decks will fall off. We've actually seen Big Priest almost completely disappear because of the combo Druid so reliably drawing their combo out before Big Priest can make an impact. We've actually seen Big Priest disappear, which is another kind of problematic deck, but it just goes to show that Psych Melon completely warps the meta around it, where there's a lot more control disruption decks, there's a lot more aggro decks being run, and I think, like I say, crazy combos should exist. They just shouldn't exist in a space where they can be done on 10-5 onwards. I don't think that should be possible, because it lessens the game, and it doesn't feel like a game anymore. So let's take a look. Next, they say, generally it's harder for any one strategy to dominate the Wild, since everything's so powerful and everyone has access to tools. I mean, this is right. That's just a card game. That statement is basically saying one deck counts as another, which is just that's what a card game is. Mid-range decks are being countered by the combo decks from the Druid. Aggro decks are countering the Druids because aggro decks in Wild are more aggressive and can deal with the Druids a little bit better. So yeah, I think it's basically the same as standard. Decks counter other decks, so that statement's fairly straightforward. Don't really need to look into that. But then you go on and say, do we want these strategies to exist? Well, yeah, you want decks to counter other decks, definitely. But what you don't want, like I've mentioned just before, you don't want Druid to be able to pull off their combo from turn 5 onwards, because turn 2, Wild Growth, turn 3, which would then be Psych Melon, turn 4, which would then be Nourish, into full combo, you're pretty much done from turn 5 onwards. That's what shouldn't exist. Then they go on to say, we know that there are players who would prefer to have a mode that offers that kind of gameplay. Yeah, fairly straightforward. I agree. Every player is different. There will be players that want to do these crazy combos. Like, people enjoy playing Naga Sea Witch because they want to see, Giants pop up on turn 5. There's people that want to play Druid because they can combo so early. But the thing you need to decide is, the Hearthstone team need to decide, is that what they want Wild to be, because I know you can't please anyone. You'll alienate one group of people, and another group of people will enjoy this type of combo deck. But you have to, I don't know, it needs to be, it just needs to be addressed. Like, at what point does it stop being an interactive? When does it stop being interactive gameplay? If I'm playing an aggro deck and I'm just trying to punch face as fast as possible, and there's no interactivity, the druid's just armoring up, ramping up, and then Psych Melon, next turn, combo done. There's no interactivity there. I feel like you have to decide, put your foot down and say, this is what we want Wild to be. I completely understand that, people enjoy different aspects of Wild, of Standard, of Hearthstone in general. People want to do crazy combos. People just want to win. People enjoy these type of combos going off really early. But you do have to decide, at what point does it stop becoming gameplay? At what point does it stop becoming fun? At what point is there's no interactivity between both players? There's also a point to consider that the reason we have multiple modes in Hearthstone is to play them differently. So what that statement's saying there is, there's a downside to nerfing too many cards for Wild play, and I agree, completely agree. Even Shaman, perfectly fine deck. Like they said before, the power levels are there. Obviously, the power levels are a lot higher than they are in Standard, because you got the cards like Flame Wraith and Totem Golem, Thing from Below, perfectly fair deck. Odd Paladin, perfectly fair deck. Odd Rogue, perfectly fair. In the past, I'd say that Druid, perfectly fair. Combo Druids are perfectly fair, I'd say, because the combo did take some time to set up, and they had no way to completely draw out the deck. I think for the most part, Wild, like they said before, decks counter other decks. There's no, prevalent deck in the past. Now I'd argue that Psych Melon is causing similar issues to how Nagasiwich was, and that's the point I think the team need to step in and modify some of these cards. It'll be a rare occurrence, don't get me wrong. It'll be rare with that they'll need to step in and modify a card, but I think for the longevity of Wild, the team will need to step in at certain points to rein a card back in. Now, I agree it is bad to to nerf a bunch of cards, but I do feel that one or two cards will need to be nerfed now and in the future as well, to keep it playable and fun. Otherwise, it just becomes into kind of I don't want to say kind of like a solitaire. if these combo decks are able to do these uninteractive things constantly, you could argue you could run Rat or Demonic Project, but then it becomes a case of, if you don't draw it in time, turn 5 onwards, maybe if you don't draw it past turn 7 or whatever, you just don't win the game. And again, that's not a fun experience. It's similar to like say to see which, where if you're playing Priest, you needed a Light Bomb, something like that. You needed a board clear, basically. If you didn't draw it, it was game over, and it was fairly quick. They go on to say, but we also recognise that decks like Nagasi, which become too prevalent and simply aren't fun to play against. So they're fully aware of that situation. It did take them a while to change that card. It was an 8-month period where Sea Witch was on the ladder. To be fair, it was less prevalent in the first 4 months because Warlock didn't have access to the file and stuff like that. It was only after I think it was Cobble and Catacombs released that the Sea Witch deck was starting to become a big problem. Lastly, they go on to say, we'd love to hear your opinions about what you want from Wild, how you think it is now, and what's the role you see for Wild in the future of Hearthstone. So, like I say, you can send suggestions off. There's ways to do it through forums and whatnot, Reddit, and actually on the article itself. be constructive. So I think from my perspective, pretty happy with it overall. I think even Shaman, Odd, Paladin, all the decks that I've mentioned previously are in a good place. I think Druid's in a bit of a dominant, I don't know, so I don't want to say dominant position, but it's in a really unfun position to play against at the minute. Like I say, you could look at the stats. I know the sample size is small and wild, but you could look at the stats, and the stats might not show Druids to be very favourable, because probably people are playing a lot of aggro decks to try stomp them. If you are playing a control deck or a mid-range deck, and you don't draw your card disruption, or you don't get enough pressure on board, then Druid is a very unfun. I think the thing to look at is interactivity and fun, and it's very unfun at the minute. Now, Combo Druid was fine in the past, because it did take them quite a long time to set up the combo, but with Psych Melon being printed, it just gives them everything they need straight away. So from my perspective, fairly happy at the minute. I think could do with stepping in, increasing the mana on that card, or taking one of the card draws away from it, making it a draw 3 cards or draw 2 cards at a certain mana cost. I think that is the culprit of the current complaints about Combo Druid. I think it is the Psych Melon, it's nothing else. Aviana Kun, I think, is fine. It wasn't a problem in the past. I think it's just this draw mechanic that makes the whole combo aspect of the whole Druid combo really cheap. It just cheapens the whole competitive. Well, it kind of cheapens the whole skill level, because playing Combo Druid of the past, you'd have to know when to UI, because sometimes you have to sacrifice overdrawing a card. You have to know when to use your poison seeds and removal and whatnot, and ramp, the right times. Whereas now you just play Wild Growth and Psych Melon, and it's just it just cheapens the whole deck as well. Playing it takes away some of the skill decisions. It takes away some of the decisions, and playing against it does not feel good at all. So from what I would like to see in the future from the Hearthstone team would be very small needed balance changes. Not much, very small. Maybe in an even not even every expansion it would be needed. But if something comes along like Sea Witch, Razar with the Shotgun Priest or Machine Gun Priest, absolutely. I think a card should be changed for the health of the wild meta. So that's it. I think I agree with most of the statements that they've made there. The questions that they've posed are fairly reasonable. And I hope they do choose to continue to support Wild and make sure it's a fun, playable format, even though the amount of people playing it at the minute aren't anywhere near the amount as a standard ladder. But I think a way to remedy that is more tournament support. Because in the past, there's only been two open tournaments put on by Blizzard, and there's also been a few third-party ones like the History of Hearthstone, which were really fun to play in and really fun to watch. When I went back and watched the other games, watching the old cards in play, and seeing Naxxramas cards, seeing Blackrock Mountain cards, it's a newer and more fun kind of format for tournaments. So I'd like to see Blizzard maybe support a couple of more in the year, and maybe do a few events for it.